When you're training for a hiking adventure, sometimes it can get a little bit tricky balancing out how much work you're doing through the week and how much stress you're putting through certain areas of the body. And in today's video, we're going to be talking through some ideas around how you can get the balance between getting everything you need to cover a comprehensive training program for hiking and also making sure that you're not overdoing things and absolutely running yourself into the ground. So essentially this particular video is inspired by a question we got in our community group. And essentially the question was, I'm currently doing some high mileage, heavy incline training. I'm looking at my time in the gym. My inclination right now, because I'm doing so much training, is to bias my gym training and my strength training to be almost exclusively upper body work or core, given how much I'm working on my legs elsewhere. And in this context, I think the person was doing a lot of walking, a lot of treadmill walking, or whatever it may be. And I don't want to create other issues in my efforts to avoid injury in my already cranky lower body. So it's a pretty common question that does come up with a lot of people, particularly when they're trying to put together their own programs. Because a lot of hikers will fall into the fact of saying, okay, I've got to do all of this cardio and I've got to walk and walk and walk and walk and walk. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, how can I actually have the energy, have the inclination to do other things like strength training on these areas? And we're going to dive into this and explain how we can go about this. So realistically, let's give a bit of context on some of the problems in this situation, because it can be very, very tricky to sort of balance out the training and any type of training program to make sure you are really fitting in what you want without overdoing things. Now, when it comes down to training for hiking, there are different types of training which are going to give different outcomes and different types of training which is going to be really, really beneficial. Now, on the strength training side of things, strength training specifically will help develop muscular strength. Now, muscular strength, a lot of hikers overlook this, but this particular element of fitness is really, really, really valuable for a number of reasons. It's such a significant thing you can do to reduce the risk of pain and injury, both on and off the trail. It's really, really valuable to help your legs go up and down hills, helps you with pack carrying, helps you with movement speed, and a bunch of other things. So developing strength is really, really valuable. On top of that, strength training can also develop some muscular endurance. Now, in the hiking context, take this with a bit of a grain of salt because there is a little bit of a difference from doing, say, 15 or 20 reps in a gym, which is traditionally endurance training, to actually being ready to go out and do hours and hours of climbing up a hill, which is hiking context endurance. So take that with a bit of grain of salt, but there is some endurance development there. Now, on the flip side of things, when we're looking at cardio, so when we're looking at walking, running, cycling, swimming, elliptical, that type of stuff, cardio will develop different aspects of fitness depending on how you go about this. Because realistically, not all cardio is created equal. Not all fitness is created equal. In our body, we have different various energy systems on how the body produces energy in different situations. And the different types of training we do and cardiovascular training we do will develop different adaptations in the body and different responses to these energy systems. So we're going to lump in cardio as a whole, but just know there are a lot of layers to it. Now, cardio will develop fitness and it will also develop some endurance. So things like stairs or hills, that type of stuff will develop that muscular endurance, and that repeated going up and up and up and up and up can be valuable. But one thing to be really, really clear is cardio in all its shapes or forms, even if you are doing really heavy loaded pack walk going up a hill, it's never going to be considered strength training. It may be considered endurance training, but it's never going to be considered strength training. And it's never going to be a replacement of strength training. And it's never going to be able to unlock the particular benefits that strength training has. So ultimately what that means, to get the best results from training for hiking, we want to be ensuring we're taking a comprehensive approach with our programming and making sure we are actually covering all these bases. So what this means is in a week, we ideally want to be developing some type of strength and endurance through the entire body. So lower body, upper body, core, making sure we're covering our bases, making sure we're getting the areas they want the attention to get all the benefits. We want to be making sure we're doing some type of lower intensity cardio. So stuff that's going to be developing what we call the aerobic energy system, which is most valuable for hikers. And then also, we do want some periods of doing some higher intensity conditioning cardio. So things that are going to be a little bit more challenging, which can stress the body in slightly different ways, develop different energy systems and be really valuable. All of these things, they're so valuable for hikers. And when you put them all together, they are greater than the sum of their own parts. So the idea behind sort of, okay, I'm doing a lot of cardio, I'm just not going to really do strength. You can do it and you may get away with it, but I would sort of say it's not going to be optimal and you probably can do a little bit better. However, saying this, obviously, then we need to look in the context as a hiker who's doing walking, maybe doing cycling, maybe doing running, some hikers do, or whatever it may be. We are going to find ourselves doing a lot of work on the legs because we're going to do strength training on legs. We're going to do walking sessions, hills, stairs, all of this. And if we don't manage this right, this can lead to a lot of soreness. And we're like, oh, the legs are just sore. And if we push this too far, it can potentially lead to overuse injuries. So things like plantar fasciitis or shin splints or hiker's knee, all very common in the hiking community. Now, where this sort of comes from is not so much of just like doing legs all the time and sort of say, hey, if I train my legs 5 days a week, this is going to happen. But it sort of comes from a couple of different situations. And sort of these are the things that are the main issues in this situation, which we need to be aware of. Now, on the strength side of things, when we're looking at strength training, the traditional approach to strength training that a lot of people talk about and think about, and maybe have done in the past, a lot of it comes from a background in bodybuilding. In the sense of a lot of people will go to a gym and they'll do a leg day, or they'll go and do a chest day or a back day or whatever it may be, where we do lots and lots and lots of exercises on a certain part of the body. And this can be really, really good for bodybuilding or for developing muscles and trying to grow your muscles. Not particularly necessary for hikers, and this can end up just overloading certain areas and making us get a little bit tired and doing too much. And there's also on the strength side of things, some people just train a little bit too hard. Some people are like in that whole go hard or go home mindset, and that is something which will trip you up in this situation. Now, the same thing for cardio. Again, a lot of people will do their cardio and they'll just go a little bit too hard. It'll be too fatiguing. So all through the week, they've got sore legs, they're struggling or whatever it may be. And they kind of feel like every single session needs to be a sweat fest. They need to really be tired and fatigued for that to be beneficial. But realistically, these common approaches to training, this is where it can trip people up. And in all honesty, it's not necessary, and you can do much, much, much better than this. So if you're in this situation and you're a hiker and you're like, okay, how do I actually balance this out? Let's talk through a few solutions. So we've stated the problems, let's talk about the solutions. Realistically, to get the best results from your training as a hiker, you want to be exposing the body to full body strength, meaning lower body, upper body, core, as well as cardio in the same week. And we want to consistently be doing this week after week after week after week. If you're just pulling bits and pieces and just skipping bits and pieces out, you're probably selling yourself short. For me, and the way I program for my hikers, is I typically have hikers doing this through their entire training. And basically, every single week, they will get some strength training, full body, and some cardio in one way, shape, or form. Now, for some people, if they're training up for a particular endpoint, and say they have a particular trip somewhere, the ratios of this may shift. So we may start off 50-50, and then we'll sort of end up, as we get close to the trip, we'll do less strength and more cardio and keep on shifting that ratio as we get closer for some people, but there will always be exposures to both. So when we're looking at this realistically, and I've seen this again and again and again and again and again, because I do this every single day, it is very, very possible to balance out all this leg dominant work. Even if you're doing leg training a lot of days in the week, it's very, very possible to balance this out in a way that is being nice to your body, is sustainable, is doable, and more importantly, is still effective and safe. So how do we go about this? On the cardio side of things, so let's talk about walking, hiking, stair climbing, hill climbing, cycling, elliptical, whatever it may be. A few important things here. Number one, hikers do not need to be doing hard cardio training all the time. What I mean by that is you do not need to be going into these sessions feeling like they were incredibly hard every single time you train. Some of that, and a small portion of that, is good, but you can get some incredible benefits by dialing things back and pulling things back a little bit more. Now, on top of this, hikers, when you're looking at your training, you don't actually have to be walking every single day. A lot of people I speak to, they're like, hey, I go out and hike 4 or 5 times a week, and then I go out and do pack walking on the other days. Or they'll be say, I do stair sessions twice a week, pack walking twice a week, treadmill work 3 times a week, or whatever it may be. And logistically or logically, you may think this is necessary, because if I'm training for a hike and I need to hike for 5 days in a row or 7 days in a row, realistically, you may think I need to train that, but it's not necessary. You could do it, but it's not necessary, and I would sort of say it's probably not optimal. Realistically, when it comes down to your cardio training, you don't need to be doing it every single day. And when you're looking at your planning, you can do some training, which is at this more higher intensity, more difficult stuff, which will lead to a bit of fatigue, will lead to a bit of soreness, and will take a bit of effort. But it should also be complemented with plenty of lower intensity and moderate training. Now, this type of training can be really, really beneficial because it kind of biases that aerobic energy system, which is the energy system we use when we're hiking, which is best developed through low intensity, long duration training. And on top of this, when we're looking at slightly lower intensity cardio, when we're not getting really huffed and puffed, not really struggling, it's going to have that benefit of not being quite as fatiguing. So you can finish these sessions and be like, hey, I actually feel pretty fresh. So to give you some context on this, and in this particular example, we were talking about doing leg work almost every day. For most of my hikers, I usually get them doing anywhere from 2 to 3 types of cardio or hiking in a week. But in this example, I'll just say, hey, for example, let's say I'm going to do 4 types of cardio. Now, a week might look like you might do one longer hike a week, and you might say once a week, I'm going to go out and try and challenge my distance and go a little bit longer each week. Great. Now, once a week, I might do a stair session, and this session, I'm actually going to do quite high intensity. I'm going to put it back on my back. I'm going to challenge myself, push the speed a little bit, and that's actually going to be quite hard and quite fatiguing. Now, on another day, I might say, you know what? I still want a bit of exposure to my pack, but I'm going to do something a little bit lower intensity. So I might actually just go do a slow, flat pack walk for 40 minutes or 60 minutes once a week. That in itself could be really, really beneficial, but it's definitely not going to be as fatiguing as this, and it's still going to be really valuable. Then on top of that, I might be like, you know what, actually, I still want to fit in another cardio session. So I might go and do once a week an off-feet session, something like a cycling session or elliptical or swimming or something like that, where I can still expose that aerobic energy system to some good things, but it's not really going to be very fatiguing. And it's going to be off feet, so I'm not actually putting pressure through the feet, which often get tired first. So as you can see here, if we're doing 4 days in a week, that's a nice mix, and that's very, very, very sustainable. And that also gives us some room to fit in this strength training, which we'll go into in a moment. So if you end up doing 4 days of this and then 2 days of strength training, that works out pretty well. And even if you end up doing 4 days of this, 2 days of strength training, that ends up being 6 days of work on your legs, the way this is balanced out and the way this works, you can still kind of work around it and it all works pretty well. Now, let's move on to strength. So strength training, as I said, really, really valuable, and we do want to be getting the entire body. That's where we're going to get the best benefits. But one thing we need to be aware of is hikers do not need to train like bodybuilders, and I should say should not train like bodybuilders. Because if you go into the gym and you're doing strength sessions, and if you're trying to do 4 days a week, and then you go into the gym and you do squats, and then lunges, and then deadlifts, and then leg curls, then leg extensions, then leg press, or something like this, which is a typical bodybuilder workout, your legs are going to be thrashed, your legs are going to be tired, they're going to be sore for days afterwards, and it's going to affect these things. Not so good. Realistically, you will be surprised if you have taken this approach in the past, or maybe you've done like CrossFit or HIIT training where you just do lots and lots and lots of repetitions. You would be surprised about how much work you can achieve with your strength training and how much benefit you can get by doing a small amount of quality work done consistently. So the idea around the bodybuilding approach is kind of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. You don't need to do that. Small amount of work will go a long, long way. To give you context of this is an example workout structure I might use for a hiker. And this is a full body workout, which works pretty well. Now, we would do some split squats, which is predominantly working the front of the thighs, the quadriceps. And then we'll do some rows, which are working the back and the biceps. And then we'll do the side plank, which is a bit of core. And then we'll do some type of mobility, whatever we want. And then we repeat that 3 times. Then we do some glute bridges and some calf raises, and we repeat that 3 times. And you can see in this whole workout, I get exposure to the front of my legs, I get exposure to the back of my legs, I get exposure to the lower legs, I get a bit of upper body, a bit of core, a bit of mobility. That's a really nice full body workout, and we can go through that, get a lot of benefit in regards to developing strength, but it's not going to be very fatiguing. So the next day, we can go out and do whatever session we want. And then typically I would sort of build that out with a second workout in a week, which would complement this. So we basically say, hey, we're going to do another workout, which will work other areas of the body. So this one's working the back, maybe next the other session we'll do something that's working the front of the upper body, and so forth. And that works out pretty well. So a small amount of work goes a long way. And then on top of that, again, we don't want to go down that approach of the go hard, go home with your strength training, because it's just not necessary. I personally like to take this approach with my strength training. This is what I recommend for most of my hikers, is opposed to doing this whole training where you just have to absolutely flog yourself and push yourself to the limit and all of that. I like to use what's called 2 reps in reserve, which what basically means is if you're doing an exercise, and say we're doing glute bridges, and say you're going to do 10 repetitions, then what you do in this situation is you find a weight which if you really, 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 really needed and really wanted to, you could probably do 12 repetitions if you really pushed yourself. But instead of doing 12 repetitions, you just do 10 repetitions. So you have 2 reps in reserve. And essentially that's the weight and that's the level of difficulty you use for your exercises. The beauty behind this is it will give you enough stimulus to improve you and develop your strength and get you stronger, but it is much less fatiguing than absolutely going to the limit. So this can be a really good way of going about things. So wrapping up strength training, small amount of quality work, looking at moderate intensity can go a long way. And then finally, if you are doing all of this training and you are worried about your body bouncing back in between sessions, and if your legs are always sore or you can't perform your sessions or whatever it may be, realistically, you either need to reduce what you're doing and take a day out of your week or hone into recovery. So, reducing what you're doing may just say, hey, I'm going to do 2 strength sessions in a week. I'm going to do 3 cardio sessions in a week. That's actually going to be my week. That might be a good balance for you. Or if you're honing in your recovery, then you just need to think about, okay, what can I do to help my body bounce back and recover in between sessions? Main points to consider on recovery, I'm not going into too much detail here, but nutrition. Are you eating enough food? A lot of hikers undereat and really just don't fuel enough. And are you eating the right foods? Are you making sure you're getting a mix of carbohydrates, protein, and fat, having a nice comprehensive diet that's covering all your bases? If you're not sure what you're doing with nutrition, that might be something to dive into. Hydration, that plays a big role in recovery. Are you hydrated through the day? Are you drinking water? Sleep, are you getting enough sleep? And is your sleep deep? If not, maybe worthwhile putting a bit of attention there. Stress, are you carrying a lot of stress for work, from family, whatever it may be? If so, you may not be able to remove that stress, but there are things you can do to manage that. So all of this will play a big role in your recovery as well. So I've rambled on a little bit on this video, but just to wrap things up, realistically, when it comes down to your training, a hiker, in my opinion, should strive to follow a comprehensive training program, making sure you're ticking off all your boxes, because if you do, that type of stuff really comes together to be greater than the sum of its parts. And if you do program this out right, it is very doable and safe. This isn't me just talking about things. This is literally what I do every single day, and I've helped hundreds and hundreds of hikers with this. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of direction. If you're unsure about this is probably a case of saying, okay, I watched through this, still doesn't make sense. I'm a little bit concerned. Then as opposed to just dropping things, it may be worthwhile, reaching out for help from there. But with that being said, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that gives a little bit of insight, and hopefully that helps a few people just balance this out. Because I know it can be tricky. I know it can be difficult, but if you can get this right, I promise you it'll make a big difference for your hiking. So with that being said, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.